Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, Fransab. How are you?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. I'm well, thank you. Jazakallah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Good. Jazakallah for coming into the studios. Fransab, let's cut to the chase. You've written 6 books. You've co-authored 6 books.
Right.
And mashallah, now you're coming out with another 7th title that you have authored. We thought that why not get the author into the studios,
Right.
have him introduce the book, so that we can better understand what this book will be about. So I had a chance to have an early preview of the book as well. I got a chance to go through it, see the different topics that you've discussed in the book. And the gist that I got from this book is that it's a self-help book.
Right.
And you've titled it rightly, Rise, Transform, Succeed, Habits for Muslim Youth.
Yeah.
And while I was going through the book, another book that came to my mind was Atomic Habits, a very prominent self-help book that's out there, and people have been reading it a lot. And the question is, what makes your book different from the other self-help books that we have available to us? Because I'm going to go to a library, I'm going to go to a bookstore. There's going to be shelves full of self-help books, a separate section devoted to just that topic. And if I go to a bookstore, I see all these books. What would make me take out your book rather than James Clear's book and say, I want to read Farhan Iqbal Sahib's book? So
If
you can tell us about
by the way, James Clear's
book
is fantastic at Atomic Habits.
Indeed.
And in fact, it's part of the inspiration for this book, because I read this book about 3 or 4 years ago, and when I went through it, and I was amazed by the strategies that he has talked about in building habits. And there were certain habits that I wanted to work on myself. So I started using the same strategies to develop those habits. And as I had developed some of those habits over the years, I thought that it would be very beneficial for Muslim youth to have a book that also talks about habits, but more targeted towards Islamic habits. And whenever I write a book, I always ask this question, that it should fulfill a need. It shouldn't be something that is just reiterating what other books have stated or what other books have talked about, or at least developing something that maybe another book has talked about, but is developing that idea further. So in this book, again, I felt that there's a need for Islamic habits, right? What you find in Atomic Habits is the philosophy or the general principles, but how do we employ those ideas for Islamic habits in particular? That is what the need of this book is. If you are a young khadim and you want to develop certain habits that are obviously from an Islamic perspective meant to help you get closer to God Almighty, meant to make you a better Muslim, then this book is the one for you.
Yes, no. Understandable. And you've mentioned 10 habits in your book. Many more commandments of the Holy Quran, like for a believer, over like 500, 700 commandments, but you've chosen the fundamental 10, habits that a Muslim, should develop in their life. So when we said, if a person like myself, I got a chance to read the book. Once the book comes out, is published, our audience, our Khudam brothers, they're going to take this book and then read it. As an author, as a person who's written this book, what do you, what is your point of view? What do you expect the reader to take away from the book at the end of the day? Like, what was your fundamental point from this? You mentioned it a little bit, that to develop Islamic habits.
So I've selected 10 different habits, 10 essential habits that I felt that Muslim youth should adopt. And of course, there are others, as you mentioned, there are other commandments. And so if you want to develop some kind of habit, you can use the same strategies. But those 10 essential habits and how those habits can be formed, I use the principles that are found in Atomic Habits as well. And then I talked about how Islam itself has ingrained certain things that can help us make a certain action or certain commandment habitualized, right? So for instance, there is salat, there is the namaz that we have to offer. So I've talked about how Islam itself has certain things, like for instance, the azan is there, right? The azan is like an announcement for the salat. It's a reminder. It makes it obvious. So one of the laws of habit formation is make it obvious, make it easy. That's another law. So when you make something obvious, right, the azan is meant to be an announcement, and it becomes obvious that I have to go and offer prayer, then it becomes easy to turn that action into a habit, right? Instead of, so another one is make it easy. So if you live close to the mosque, if you live close to the namaz center, then it will be a lot easier to make congregational salat a habit, as opposed to living far away from the mosque, where it's much harder to get to the namaz center or the mosque. So in the same way, making it obvious could also mean that if you want to read the Quran is in a place where you can easily access it. If we have, unfortunately, some Muslims who wrap up the Quran out of respect, and then they put it up in a high shelf, which is harder to get to. So if it's hard to get to, the chances are lesser that you would actually go and get the Quran to open it and read it.
Say out of sight, out of mind.
Right, exactly. So that's the takeaway from this book, basically. Yeah.
No. I mean, from what I read, like I've just gotten skimmed through the book and the 10 habits that you've mentioned, and that's what I got from this. That I personally haven't come across such a book. I mean, I've come across Atomic Habit and other self-help books, but nothing that would help you, or that would tell you that how do you implement Islamic habits into your life. And so the 4 fundamentals of establishing a habit, mashallah, you explained it very well in the book as well, taking inspiration from the Holy Quran and from the Ahadith as well. And as you mentioned, Islam has already set up those steps for us. It's just up to us to implement them. And something that was very interesting for me in this book was obviously the new graphics that are there as well, and also you've included a calendar at the end of your book, which enables the reader to mark their habits down and see how they progress throughout the month or throughout the year for their habits. So I think that was a very interesting addition to a book, a first of its kind, or at least for me personally, for reading other books as well. And I was saying, you have a orange color book, so it'll be very easy to pick out and spot in the sea of books that are there in the library or in the bookstore. Jazakallah Rabbi for coming in and introducing the book, and inshallah, once the book is released, is published, and our readers get a hold of it, I'm sure they'll have questions, follow-up questions, and maybe in the future we can come back into the studios and discuss those questions and answer them. So
for sure, inshallah.
Looking forward to the book, inshallah.
Jazakallah, inshallah.